If you were to ask what the rarest bug, fish, and sea creature is in Animal Crossing New Horizons, you're bound to get a lot of different answers. Most likely these answers come from that person's experience struggling to catch said creature. Maybe they've been playing for years and still haven't caught it. And no matter what your answer is, it's almost impossible to say that somebody is wrong for their answer when they're just going off of what they've experienced playing the game. Almost impossible, anyway, because after all, there is no standardized system that weighs various factors about every creature in the game and then assigns that creature a rarity score to determine who is the most rare, right? Introducing the PITA Index, a method that I came up with to determine what creature in the game is the biggest PITA, or pain in the ass. Every creature in Animal Crossing New Horizons is given a score based on various spawning factors, and then ranked from nary a pain in my bottom to sitting on attack and belting out a Mel Blanc-like scream. If you don't care about the explanation of how these scores are determined, skip to this time in the video. If you want a brief explanation, then here you go. If you want the full explanation, well then here it is. First, we have to decide which factors determine rarity. I narrowed it down to 4 things: yearly availability, spawning percentage, town availability, and total catch requirement. Yearly availability is determined by what percentage during the year that creature spawns. The citrus longhorn beetle, for example, is available throughout all 12 months of the year and all 24 hours of the day, so that gets a 100% yearly availability. The yellow perch is available for only 6 months of the year, but for all 24 hours during those months, so that's a 50% yearly availability. But something like the flatworm is only available for 2 months out of the year and then 17 hours out of the day, so that gets a low yearly availability of 11.8%. Of course, something with low yearly availability is naturally more rare. The formula for determining yearly availability does not account for the fact that not all months are equal in length, but as I always say, it's good enough. Spawning percentage is taken from the game itself, which is available through data mined information. Most people would be satisfied in just using this factor when looking for an answer as to what the rarest creature in the game is. But let's take something that has a 2% spawning chance, the Rosalia Patesi beetle, and something with a 5% spawning chance, the giant stag. I won't spoil what these creatures scored, but what I will tell you is that despite its higher spawning percentage, the giant stag scored higher than the Rosalia Patesi beetle despite spawning more often. Partially because its availability throughout the year is much lower, and also for reasons that we still have yet to discuss. This ensures that this index isn't overly simple in its approach to determining the rarest creature by simply saying, this is 1% and this is 3%, upload video. Town availability is how accessible that creature is within your island. It's up to me to determine the extent that this availability, or lack thereof, affects the final score. A score of 80 means that this creature is widely available, with little to no restriction, all the way down to a score of 20, which means that this creature has very specific spawning criteria. Bug spawning conditions, for example, have a lot of variety, ranging from being found all over the place, to some requiring hybrid flowers to spawn. Fish are similar in this regard, with something spawning in the entire ocean being more widely available than something that only spawns in the pond. Sea creatures aren't affected by this, as no sea creature is any less available than others. Finally, total catch requirement is the 4th and least significant factor that determines score. This is simply how many creatures need to be caught before that creature begins to spawn on your island. For bugs and fish, this ranges anywhere from 0 catches, meaning that they spawn from the start of the game, to 100 catches. Sea creatures max out at 80 catches needed. So it makes sense that a creature that can't even show up until you've met this requirement is more rare, but this factor weighs in less than others because somebody who has already met all the requirements will of course not be affected by this. But even so, you could still treat total catch requirement as an indirect measure as to the difficulty of catching that creature. A sea bass, for example, something with no catch requirement, is a lot easier to catch than a coelacanth, which is something with 100 fish required. There are exceptions to this rule though. The scorpion and the tarantula weirdly have no total catch requirement, which is why they score rather low on the index. It's one of the few reasons why this scoring system is flawed, as they would rank comparably with some of the more rarer bugs if their total catch requirement was 100, for example. But anyway, those are our 4 factors. But that's not all that we need to consider. I'm adding a score multiplier if a creature has a spawning restriction that deals with the weather. This is mostly relevant for bugs, of which many will not spawn if it's raining, so those will receive a small multiplier to their final score. There are 2 creatures that spawn only in rain though, that being the snail and the coelacanth. Those will receive substantial multipliers to their final scores. These multipliers are times 1.161 if a creature doesn't spawn in rain, and times 7.194 if a creature only spawns in rain. The way that I got these numbers was by sampling 5 years of weather data on my island by using my weather seed on MeteoNook. I've featured this website many times before in my videos, but to summarize, it can show you years of weather forecasts for your island based on your island's weather seed. There are over 2 billion weather seeds that your island can possibly have, and this website can help you figure out what yours is by simply inputting what your weather is on a daily basis. My weather seed is 923161662, and I use 2025 through 2029 to count how many rainy days I will have over the course of those 5 years. What I came up with is an average of 136 rainy days, or about 37% of the days out of the year. I thought about stopping there, but then I remembered that even though a day might feature rain, it never features rain for all 24 hours. Weather can change hour by hour, so I took the 27 different rainy day patterns and I counted how many rainy hours that there are within those days. 27 different patterns means 648 total hours, of which 243 hours feature rain. That's 37.5% of rainy hours during the roughly 37% of days that feature rain. That means that any given hour in a year has about a 13.9% chance to be raining, thus giving us our final score multipliers. Now that we have all that, it's time to make the formula that puts all these factors into consideration to find that creature's PITA score. First, we need to decide how much each factor should weigh into the final score. I decided that the most important factor should be spawning percentage, which has a weight of 40%. While I did say that spawning percentage shouldn't be the be-all end-all for determining rarity, it should certainly affect it a good amount. Then yearly availability has a weight of 30%, less than spawning percentage, but enough to where a creature that is only available for a very small part of the year will likely still score relatively high. Then town availability has a weight of 20%. While it's maybe not as important as the first 2 factors, I still wanted to emphasize the difference between a fish that, for example, only spawns on the pier compared to something that spawns in the entire ocean. Total catch requirement has a weight of just 10%, again, for the reason that it's irrelevant once you've met the requirements, but it is still mostly indicative of that creature's catch difficulty. Then we simply take the result of those first 4 factors, and we multiply them depending on whether the creature has spawning restrictions due to the weather. Then I'll divide the final result by 1,000 to keep the numbers smaller and more digestible. Sea creatures have less factors involved in their spawning, being that all sea creatures spawn everywhere in the ocean, and none of them are affected by the weather, so we'll eliminate those factors and weigh spawning percentage at 50%, yearly availability at 40%, and total catch requirement still at 10%. Let's run the numbers for the common butterfly. It's available for 10 months out of the year and 15 hours out of the day. That gives it a yearly availability of 52.1%. Its spawning percentage is 60% according to the data mine for the game. It spawns anywhere in your town with no flowers, trees, or other special conditions needed, so we're going to give it the highest score, an 80, on the town availability. And it has a total catch requirement of 0, meaning it's available from the start of the game. The common butterfly does not spawn in rain, so we will multiply the result of what we have so far by 1.161. With this formula, the rarer the creature, the higher the score should be. So it's no surprise that the common butterfly scores only 0.12. Running the numbers for a bug that I know is much more rare, the giant stag for example, gives us an appropriately much higher score, so it passes this very basic sanity check. And we're ready to input the numbers for every creature in this game to find out what bugs, fish, and sea creatures are the biggest PITA. We're going to go through lists from 10th place to 1st place, starting with bugs. And number 10 is the Queen Alexandra's birdwing butterfly with a score of 36.84. This score is largely driven by the fact that it's only available for 13.9% of the year, and when it is here, it only spawns at a 5% rate. Being that those are the two factors that carry the most weight, it's no surprise that it cracks the top 10. But what keeps it from being higher up though is the fact that it only needs flowers to spawn, while many bugs above it have more specific spawning conditions. The cicada shell is number 9 with a score of 42.32. It's one of the most disproportionate creatures in the game when you weigh its rarity versus its sell price. It's only available for 16.7% of the year, and it's tied for the lowest spawning percentage in the game at just 1%, and it sells for a whopping 10 bells. It's definitely one of the more confusing bugs in the game. Number 8 is the banded dragonfly with a score of 45.05. It features the highest spawning percentage of any bug in the top 10, but it is only available for 18.8% of the year, and it gets a slightly lower availability score due to the fact that it, and all the dragonflies, spawn only near the rivers on your island. It also receives a small score multiplier because of the fact that it does not spawn in rain. If it did though, it would be enough to put it one place lower. So even though that multiplier may be small, it does still matter. Now from here, every bug in the top 10 are the usual suspects that you would expect to be featured in this list. The rare and expensive palm tree beetles. The most common of which is the Goliath beetle, which is only available for 4 months out of the year as opposed to all the other palm tree beetles, which are only available for 2. That's the main factor that separates it from its fellow beetles, as every other bug from here on out features the same availability and total catch requirement. Which is why there's a 3-way tie for the 4th rarest bug in this game. The Cyclomatus stag, horned atlas, and horned elephant all have identical spawning conditions, and thus identical scores of 132.6. All 3 of them are only available in the months of July and August, at a 2% rate, on palm trees only, and require 100 bugs to have been caught. However, the rarest bugs in the game have a score that is ever so slightly higher due to the fact that they spawn at a 1% rate. These 3 that all tie for the rarest bug in the game are the golden stag, giraffe stag, and horned Hercules. When I asked you guys what the rarest creatures are in the game from your experiences, these beetles were a popular answer, and you'll be happy to know that the numbers back you up. But what about some of the other bugs that were popular answers amongst the community that weren't featured in the top 10? The walking stick ended up being the 23rd rarest bug in the game, because while it is available for a very small portion of the year, it spawns at a 10% rate when it is available. My guess is that people feel that it's rarer because it's only available for 6 hours during the game, which is the lowest of any insect. And of those 6 hours, 4 of them are from 4 AM to 8 AM, which are not exactly very popular times for most players. The fly is ranked 75th out of 80 in rarity among bugs, and this is where an argument that my index sucks and I should delete my channel can be made. Obviously, it's severely penalized for being available all throughout the year, and it has no total catch requirement. I put things that spawn on trash as a 40 on the town availability, but that still wasn't enough to give it a respectable rarity. This is one of those creatures, and there will be a few of them, where the score might not match the eye test, because I do agree that this thing should not be ranked among the likes of the wharfroach and the common butterfly. But in defense of this score, you're probably not littering trash around your island as liberally as you are flowers or trees. I hazard a guess that if you had an equal amount of rotting turnips on your island as you do flowers, you might end up with as many flies as you do butterflies. But who wants to do that, right? Now, if you've watched me a lot in the past, you've probably had a bug that came to mind when you think of pain in the ass. The flea is another one where the score doesn't reflect the rarity as well as I would hope. It's the 58th rarest bug in the game according to my index, but number 1 in my heart. My only defense is that it's one of the few bugs in this game that you cannot force to spawn. Palm tree beetles can be manipulated into appearing by making it so that the only thing on your island is palm trees. But as we've learned through my challenges before, it really doesn't work that way with the flea. For as many times as I've tried hunting it, you'd think that I would have a better idea of how it works, but I do not. Think of it like this though. On an average island with no time traveling, played every day for 1 year at various times throughout the day, and with no effort made to try to get any specific bugs, I do believe that you would encounter more fleas than you would golden stags, for example. And I think that that's the conditions that should be assumed for every creature in this index. Now it's time for the top 10 rarest fish in the game. This top 10 is much more interesting than bugs in my opinion, due to the fact that it features no ties, and most fish that are here for different reasons. Starting with number 10, the king salmon is tied for the second lowest availability throughout the year with its plebeian counterpart, the regular salmon. The king salmon easily beats it though, with only a 5% spawning rate and a total catch requirement of 20 fish. It also shares the lowest availability score of 20, since it's only available in the mouths of your island's river, something that you can only get 2 of, and you cannot make any more. Number 9 is the barrel eye with a score of 36.57, just edging out the king salmon. Despite their similar scores, the way that they achieve that score is very different. The barrel eye features a lower spawning rate of 1% and a higher total catch requirement of 100, both tied for number 1 in those regards. But its availability is much higher since it's got the whole damn ocean to spawn, and it's available for all 12 months out of the year compared to the king salmon spawning in just 1 month. And it's that wide range of availability throughout the year and within your island that keeps it from being any higher on this list. The Dorado is the 8th rarest fish in the game, with a score of 39 on the dot. Okay, well not actually on the dot. 39.0000996. The Dorado is one of many fish that spawn for about a quarter of the year in the summer months. But among fish of similar yearly availability, it features one of the lowest spawning percentages at just 2%, and a total catch requirement of 100. It's the highest score of any fish that spawns anywhere in your river, and the second highest fish of any fish with the highest town availability score of 80. Number 7 is the gar, available for the same amount of time throughout the year as the Dorado, but it's scored higher because it's only available in the pond, rather than the whole river. I score all pond fish with a 50 town availability, as there is almost certainly less area in your island that features ponds than rivers. And while you can argue that fish bait can be used to spawn it much easier than the Dorado simply because of how fewer pond fish that there are, we assume a similar logic that we did with bugs, where we ignore any specific attempt to find certain creatures and rather gauge these numbers based on how often a normal, non-time traveling player would find these fish on average. Number 6 is the tuna, one of 2 fish in the top 10 that's only available on your island's piers. This very limited spawning area means that it too has a 20 availability score. While your island can spawn with up to 3 ponds, you're only ever going to get 2 piers, one on the side of your island and one by your airport. That being said, it'll be interesting to see how pier fishing spawning is affected by the fact that the upcoming 3.0 update seems to extend them out further than before. Hopefully it can help with catching the tuna, along with the next fish on this list. That being the mahi-mahi, which is the rarest pier fish in the game. It has the same spawning conditions as the tuna, but with a 1% spawning rate compared to the tuna's 2%. Since this index ignores the usage of fish bait, it makes sense how it could rank so highly because naturally coming across one of these things is incredibly rare. It's one of a few fish where you're almost guaranteed to have to use bait to find it. Hopefully though, like the tuna, the 3.0 update will make it much more accessible to find naturally. Number 4 is the giant snakehead, the rarest pond fish in the game. While it doesn't beat out the salmon and the king salmon for the fewest months that it's able to be caught, it still has a lower yearly availability due to the fact that it only spawns for 7 hours out of the day, as opposed to the salmons which are available all day. This gives it a 7.3% availability throughout the year, which is the lowest of any fish. And with just a 2% spawn rate when it is available, you better get it before it's gone. The golden trout is the 3rd rarest fish in the game, and one of 2 in the top 3 that are only available on the upper elevations of your island. That restriction is why it only gets a 50 town availability score, but it's more available throughout the year than its fellow Cliffy Boy. Still though, with a 1% spawn rate, it won't be something that you come across very often without making an effort to do so. The coelacanth would otherwise not be anywhere close to the number 2 position if it wasn't for the fact that it's the one fish whose spawning is dependent on there being rain. Despite the Critterpedia saying that it's available all year, the coelacanth can only spawn in rain, not snow, eliminating roughly 1/4 of the year that you can catch it. It has a higher spawning rate than the fish around it at 2%, and is available anywhere in the ocean. But where it gains a lot of points is through the weather multiplier. But it's not enough to make it number 1, falling just short of that distinction. The stringfish is the rarest fish in the game if my index is to be believed, and it passes the smell test for sure. Oh, wait, that is stinky. It's the one fish that I always dread having to catch the most whenever I do my challenges, being that it's another fish available in the upper elevations. It shares the same spawning conditions as the golden trout, just beating it out only because it's available less throughout the year. Now, as we did with bugs, let's see what some of the fish that you guys said were the rarest in your experiences ended up. The char was a pretty popular answer, and it ranked out at number 22. While it does have a pretty low spawning percentage, and it is another upper elevation river fish, it's available for over half the year. But I have certainly struggled to get this guy before myself, so I can see where you're coming from. The sea bass is obviously a joke from local comedian Gert20, but for those curious, it ended up 79th of 80 total fish, beating out only the horse mackerel. Question my index all you want, it definitely got that one right. In fact, these two comments were the only ones that I could find with a fair bit of agreement from the community. So while it is flawed in a couple of regards, it does seem to be a decent way of determining rarity for fish at the very least. We're only going to do the top 5 sea creatures, seeing as how there are half of them compared to bugs and fish. So number 5 is the Gigas giant clam, something that I might personally object to even if it is my index. It's tied for the lowest spawning percentage at 1%, so it's understandable why it's given me and some of you as much grief as it has. But being that it's available for over 40% of the year, and there's less factors that go into scoring sea creatures, it makes sense as to why it's only number 5. With less spawning factors, every factor naturally holds more weight. There's another tie on our list, with the sea pig and vampire squid both sharing the honors of the 3rd rarest sea creatures. Despite the sea pig being available for the months of November to February, and the vampire squid May to August, it works out to equal the same amount of time available throughout the year. Thus, they both earn a rarity score of 12.54. Number 2 is the giant isopod, earning a score of 13.21, just slightly lower than the number 1 sea creature. And this is contentious, in my opinion, because the isopod is the rarer of the two by spawning percentage, but it is available for longer throughout the year. Not by a significant margin, though, because at number 1 is the spider crab, available for only 16.7% of the year, but this guy spawns at a 2% rate rather than the isopod's 1%. And if you made me have to choose which one I would rather get, I would choose the thing that spawns doubly as often. But once again, this is how often somebody would naturally come across this creature, not which one you would rather look for if you had to optimize your chances. So I think that's why it got the edge. But if you wanted to argue that the giant isopod should be number 1, I wouldn't argue with you. Assuming that you made your own index that proves otherwise. So now the honorable mentions for sea creatures. Marin Fry claims to have literally gone bald from catching the snow crab. And he certainly is one tough sucker, being the 9th rarest sea creature, but it doesn't score nearly as highly, being that it's available for half the year and has a 2% spawn rate, rather than the 1% that many creatures above it has. The goddamn red king crab just missed being featured, as it was number 6 on my index for sea creatures. It's another case of being a slightly higher spawning percentage than those above it, but really the difference between 1% and 2% barely matters when you've been looking for something hours on end, just mindlessly spamming the swimming button and finding nothing. It makes sense how this can make you think that some creatures are rarer than the game's data would indicate. But anyway, that's all I could really find for honorable mentions among what you guys said. But if there's a bug, fish, or sea creature that didn't crack the list, and you want to see where it ended up, the link to the spreadsheet that I used to calculate and put this index together can be found in the video description. Be sure to let me know in the comments section why your personal experiences with the creature indicate that it should be higher on the list. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I eagerly await all of your angry comments.